In the first episode of 2023, I recap the 2022 Sunshine Coast real estate market, and I'm going to get out my crystal ball to make predictions for the next 12 months. The Sunshine Coast real estate market had a tumultuous year, to say the least. The benchmark price for a detached home at the end of January 2022 was $900,000, and it peaked at nearly $1,050,000 in May. Then, from spring to November 2022, prices fell an average of 2.6% per month. Numbers for December aren't available as we record this, but if that 2.6% number holds, expect the Sunshine Coast to close out 2022 with a projected detached home benchmark price of around $870,000.
That's a pretty dramatic drop in a pretty short period of time, isn't it?
Absolutely it is, yeah. I totally agree with you. But, it's not all doom and gloom. There is kind of a silver lining out there, I believe, depending on your situation.
Which would be?
Well, I think, if you've bought in the last 6 months and you find yourself having to sell, then, this is going to be, the drop in benchmark price is going to have an impact on you. But most people, if they bought longer than 6 months ago, the price is probably adjusting back to where it was when they bought it. And I don't see it really dropping too much below that. It's not going to affect everyone. And then from a buyer's perspective, obviously, things are looking up. Buyers had it tough for, a good 18 months kind of thing. And now it's a much more civilized environment to be buying. And I think that in the new year, once people start listing homes again, I think it's going to be a more balanced market, and there'll still be transactions going. And, if you're selling a house that's lost some perceived value and then buying back into the same market, it doesn't really make that much of a difference to you.
If we look back to the start of the year, the market was still hot coming out of what is traditionally a slow time of the year, but there was still a lot of demand in January. And then we saw prices climb up a little bit until the spring. So between January and May, we had a little bit of a run up. Mm-hmm. And what do you remember the market being like that time of year?
Yeah, I was amazed. Like we rolled right into January 2022, and sales were going. We were doing the same volume of sales that we were doing in summer the year before, which was a record, amount of sales. So it was just kind of like, when will it ever end? The main thing driving the market were the younger buyers that were then at that time thinking they never have to go back to work. The Sunshine Coast is a beautiful place. They can relocate here, have all of the niceties that a small town life affords them while still getting paid their salary from a company in the city. And I think that, the realization kind of kicked in. There were many factors, not the least of which was, staff shortages at the ferry and people not being able to get accommodation here. And so, there's kind of less things going on the coast. People that moved over here with kids realized that, it's a great outdoor lifestyle for retirees here or people, over a certain age. But there isn't a lot of infrastructure or restaurants or anything really set up for kids other than, soccer and that kind of stuff. But, people coming from the city that are used to certain facilities and that kind of thing for their kids and programs and things to do. We just don't have that here. So I think, that a little bit of that appeal dropped off. We're not seeing those buyers anymore, especially because they have to go back to work now. And that really was. It was kind of like a whole lot of energy at that time. A lot of younger buyers thinking, we're going to come to the coast, like a real influx of activity and buyers. And now, now we're kind of back to more of a retiree-centric kind of market.
The market peaks in May, and then we start to gradually slide down in price till coming to here the end of the year. And between the peak in May and November, for the last month that we have official numbers, the market's fallen off 15%. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to attribute that to, like you touched on, a certain demographic. They're not as excited about being here right now, mm-hmm. but also interest rates. And how much do you think interest rates played into all this?
As we saw interest rate hikes, then we saw, a slowdown in the market. I think it happened before. We started to see it before the interest rates happened, but then they exacerbated it so that there were, people qualified for less money. There were less buyers out there. We did see a little bit of a rally where people were pre-approved for a period of time. So that was kind of like a late little spike that we saw. But now, things have slowed down and there's less people qualified for less money. The thing that's actually balancing out the housing prices here is just a lack of inventory. If what we kind of predict is going to happen early next year, and you're going to see a lot of the Airbnbs get listed because, people maybe are a little bit behind the time and not haven't got their temporary use permits, or, the different municipalities actually start enforcing that, which is still up in the air how they're going to do that if these bylaws actually have any teeth. But assuming that they do, then you could see localized surge in Airbnbs being sold. Also, you could see with interest rates being where they are, and if there is additional increases, people not being able to afford the mortgage payments on those properties if they don't have that Airbnb income. So they're going to be the ones where, even if they wanted to rent long term, they may not be able to service the debt on the rental amounts that they can get for a long term rental as opposed to a short term rental, and they may be forced to sell. We start to see a bunch of inventory come on the market, I think you'll see an even further price reduction, probably more than the 2.6% per month we've seen to this point. And then once that happens, I'd imagine that will be bottom, and then we should start to see a balanced market climbing in the regular cycle to where it settles.
In November of this year, we had 23 sales, I believe, detached homes on the coast, which was the lowest number we'd had in 2 years. The inventory is kind of matching that. There's not a lot of people putting homes on the market. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like that's propping up the price a little bit?
Yes. So I think the lack of inventory is holding prices up. I think once you start to see people listing their homes because they need to sell, then you're going to see price adjustments to get ahead of the market, so to speak, and then that's going to set a new precedent for if people want to sell. It really depends, obviously, on the property and where it is. But tax assessment, a year ago was people would laugh, no way I'm going to sell for around tax assessment. Now you look at a property, unless it's got some recent renovation or a wicked view or something like that, your tax assessment's probably pretty close to what your house is worth, right? Providing it's not something that hasn't been sold for 25 years, and you're sitting there with a tax assessment that that you haven't challenged and is way lower. But on average, tax assessment's about right now, in my opinion.
Going into 2023, if we see inflation continue, the Bank of Canada may start to raise rates again. How would that impact prices on the Sunshine Coast going forward if we see more rate hikes in 2023?
I think we will see more rate hikes in 2023. Crystal ball prediction, I don't think that they have a handle on inflation. I think that there is going to be more interest rate hikes. Even if there isn't, I don't think we've seen the fallout from the interest rates hikes that they've done. I have several people where in the last 6 weeks I've gone out, done CMAs, talked to them about selling their property, talked to them about what they owe, what their payments are, that kind of stuff. And the majority of them, rather than sell at a loss, have kicked the can further down the road and decided to rent their place out, wait another year. These are secondary, homes that they own that they were using as recreation properties or renting out or Airbnbing. And what they've done is they've decided just to rent them out for a year and see where things are, at the end of that time. Now, a lot of those are going to be coming up in May or June this year. And when they do, I think it's going to be a more bleak outcome, outlook for them. And I think at that point, they're going to be forced to sell. So I think that you're going to see a lot of that over the next little bit. I think you're going to see a lot of people that are currently waiting for spring, thinking that spring is going to somehow bring a complete change in the market, even though the economy is likely in recession at that point, and they're going to have a rude awakening, and they're going to have to sell. So I think there's going to be a cascade of properties come on the market, and I think you're going to see a lot of price drops happening in a short period of time. But people are kind of seem to be taking that wait and see approach, and I think that's why buyers aren't buying now, because I think they're waiting to see what happens, and no one wants to get caught buying somewhere when there could be a big drop coming up. That being said, if you are looking to sell your house and buy somewhere new, there's no, in my opinion, point in trying to wait that out or time it, because that's a real tricky thing to do. You've just got to bite the bullet and make your lateral move or whatever it is you're doing. But I don't think we've fully seen the fallout of the interest rate hikes that have happened, and I would be surprised if in the next few months we're not seeing an even greater reduction in benchmark prices than the 2.6 per month that we've seen from January to this point, or from May to this point.
If there's a concern that prices are going to continue to fall into 2023, is there benefit to listing sooner rather than later?
I believe so, yeah. I think that if you have to sell, and this is my advice to people, if you have to sell, you may as well get it up and get it listed and get it out. In my opinion, you're better off listing it, in January than you are thinking that you're going to get ahead by waiting until spring. There will be more buyers around, but there will also be a lot more inventory on the market for all the reasons that that we kind of have laid out. So there's a lot of people out there that are hanging on to secondary places on the coast that are relying upon Airbnb revenue to be able to keep them. And if that dries up, depending on what happens with the bylaws like we talked about and them enforcing them and what the new councils decide to do as far as following through on that, that could have a big impact on the local market, in addition to all the other stuff that's going on.
A big change coming in 2023 is that the federal government is introducing a temporary foreign buyers ban. So for the next 2 years, foreign buyers will not be allowed to buy in Canada. I think there are still some questions about exactly what that's going to look like and how foreign the buyer has to be. Will it apply to spouses or students or those types of things? Mm-hmm. Depending on what this looks like, how big of an impact does that foreign buyers ban have on the Sunshine Coast?
Direct impact, I'd say minimal. We don't see, I specialise primarily in Gibsons. I have a fairly decent chunk of the market here that I look after as far as real estate goes, and I don't see a huge amount of foreign buyers. I mean, you see some, but it's not like other municipalities where you'd see a lot of them. I think the indirect impact that we may have is that our foreign buyers, or our buyers that aren't from this area, are primarily from the North Shore. North Van specifically, we see a lot of buyers coming from, and maybe those markets softening because there's less foreign buyers buying into those markets may result in less people relocating from those areas over to the Sunshine Coast because they can still afford in those areas, or there could be an adjustment in prices there. So I think it would be an indirect impact. Contrary to common misconception, there isn't a lot of buyers or foreign buyers buying on the Sunshine Coast. In summer and stuff, you might see a tour bus of people coming around checking out Sunshine Coast, and then people might think, oh God, they're buying up all the property or whatever, or they're flying around in helicopters buying waterfronts, that kind of stuff. That just doesn't happen, right? That's a common misconception. So I don't think it's not gonna have a huge direct impact on us. We may see something, as far as I don't know if it applies to businesses or commercial properties. I'm assuming it does. We do have some foreign buyers, whether they be from mainland China or India or whatever, buying into the PNP program that we have on the Sunshine Coast. And as a result of that, then they might be looking for housing or whatever in addition to that. So I guess this could put the kibosh on that a little bit as far as, the PNP program or foreign buyers buying in. But maybe their visa would make them exempt from that. I'm not sure how it works. But as far as like buying homes and a lot of foreign buyers buying property and that kind of thing, we don't see a lot of it here. I don't think it'll have a direct impact, but a secondary impact as far as people that are relocating here because foreign buyers are buying into their area, that may shut down, and so we might notice a little bit of a reduction in demand for property over here.
Something else happening in January of this year, BC will introduce its cooling off period. Is that too little too late? That's maybe a really good idea for when the market's hot, but does that have any effect now in the market that we're in?
No, I think that's, we talked about this when they were talking about doing it. I think it's kind of shutting the gate after the horses bolted. I think that, obviously the interest rate increases are the thing that really has the biggest impact on it. I mean, now we're not seeing the crazy multiple offers anyway. I mean, it would have been much more impactful, I think, that while, multiple offers were happening and it was a big frenzy to enforce that, but now we're in a buyers/balanced market, and there are subjects, and the average subject is much longer than 3 days. So depending on what the subject is and how it's worded, it becomes a moot point that you have this 3-day cooling off period. I think the thing that we talked about in the past that will have a bigger impact for us is the stopping of the restrictions for renting out strata properties, because I think now that's adding some inventory to the rental pool, and that should hopefully help with people that are looking to work here, staff housing, all that kind of stuff. I think that's good all the way around as far as it goes, and I think that'll have more of an impact than the other two things that we just spoke about.
On the topic of rentals, short-term rentals, is that maybe going to have outsized influence on the market here on the Sunshine Coast, depending on how it actually is enforced and implemented? If
they enforce it, yeah. Basically, I mean, and hopefully we've asked, who do we are? We asked Mayor Henderson and Mayor White to come on and talk about it, and they didn't say no, so maybe that'll happen. So that would be great for someone to kind of explain how they, that's in the know, how that's going to pan out. And it will probably quell quite a few fears that people may have, that where they've bought these properties thinking that they're going to be able to do it. They see now that the value's dropped, but, they're more than happy to continue providing that, that accommodation so that this tourist-based economy that we have here can keep ticking over. There's a ton of Airbnbs exist. They're still all operating. They're still operating in the SCRD and Gibsons in Seashell. And, are they going to stop operating, and how is it going to be enforced if they don't? And, so will it actually have that much of an effect? Could there be some panic selling from people that aren't aware or, aren't up on the bylaws? In my opinion, at this point, I don't think it's going to have that immediate impact that we were worried it was, just because I don't know how it's going to be enforced.
So with all that in mind, what would be your advice for buyers looking to buy on the Sunshine Coast the first part of 2023?
I think if you're a buyer that's been sitting on the fence for a year and a half, hoping for prices to drop or thinking you don't want to pull the trigger till prices drop, I'd say now's the time to do it. I think if you're you're a pre-qualified cash buyer, or a buyer that, you got your mortgage approval in place, you're ready to go, I think, start shopping in January, and, it's a great time to be buying. Now's the time to put your money where your mouth is and to pull the trigger. It's not going to get any better than buying now, in my opinion. Obviously, you're not going to buy in January and then try to flip it in March. You're going to, as long as you're buying to live in it or hold it, or you have a recreational property or do whatever you're doing, now's the time to go. As far as sellers go, if you're trying to make a lateral move, it could be a good thing to do if you want to kind of upgrade a little bit. Obviously, you're selling at the current price, but you're also going to be buying the next level up at the current price. So it's an opportunity to do that, as opposed to in a super heated market where you're paying well over kind of market value just to get into somewhere. So I think, like we talked about at the beginning, there is some silver linings to the market balancing out and being more civilized. And people are still going to buy and sell houses. I think now it's just a pause because it's so tumultuous that people are waiting to see what happens.
If you're looking to sell, how important is it to work with a realtor that really understands what's happening in the market right now?
Yeah, when you're selling, I mean, the homes that are selling, I mean, are the ones that are priced appropriately. They're sharply priced. They're priced to get ahead of the market, and there still are buyers for them. But if you're sitting on prices from, from July last year, if you've been sitting on, your home and it's been on the market for 3 or 4 months, then obviously, your expectations as far as prices is a little bit beyond. And if you're not willing to sell it for less than that, or take a loss or whatever it is, then you're better off. You're going to obviously try and hope for that angel buyer to come along. But realistically, if you do want to sell, you need to work with someone that knows the local market and can give you good advice as far as buying goes. Someone that's on top of the other listings that are up, that are either go out on Realtor Tour themselves or have people that do that to keep abreast of what values are right now. And if you're trying to do it from out of town, or with someone that isn't in this market, there is some potential jeopardy there as far as either buying too high or potentially listing too high and not selling. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. While you're here, maybe you want to check out one of my listings or watch my video about why you should choose me to sell your home.